when we are in the good times, we might write down what we're grateful for. We might just ponder it. We might say it to our partners. Like, there's no rules around how we do it. But I think it's great to be aware of what is working for us and why we feel nourished, so that when it does derail a little bit, we kind of know how to pull back or where to pivot, which can be really useful because then we get to know ourselves better.
Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Well, Hello Anxiety. I am so looking forward to today's conversation and sharing it with you, because today I get to talk to the author of one of the books that I have just loved reading recently. It's called Parenting Freedom, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before. The amazing author is Dr Renee Cachia. So Renee is a new mum of one, and that's very exciting, and also, yes, comes with a lot of change, doesn't it, Renee? Yes. Renee is also the principal psychologist and founder of Inner Bloom Psychology Practice, which is in northern New South Wales here in Australia. What I've found about Renee's work is there's just so much alignment. And one of the things Renee has written on her website is that she believes in human potential over diagnosis. And the other things that I loved on your website, Renee, was when you said what you're not about numbing pain and pleasure. And a previous guest talked about it really being one funnel. And then when we can't experience our difficult feelings and emotions, then we're also blocking the ones that feel good for us. So Renee is not about being overscheduled and not about living by default. So Renee, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me and your warm welcome. It sounds like you have really got across my work in many different ways. So that's really going to lead us into a great conversation, I think.
So tell me, how did you come to the work that you do and to this approach, this thinking around potential over diagnosis?
Yeah, it's such an interesting area, because I think on one hand, as psychologists who practice in a clinical setting, we are, early on trained to look for diagnostic patterns and check boxes and things like that. But the more experience we get and the more that we see clients and we see our collective similarities and the things that we all go through, I think as psychologists, we start to refine our view, where we can keep in mind the checkboxes and the diagnosis and the patterns, but not sort of come at it as such a rigid way. So I guess I started thinking about that when I just started to develop more experience working with people, and initially children with autism and neurodevelopmental disorders, and then sort of weaning into parenting. And parents and adults have also a number of diagnoses and a number of labels, I guess. And in a way, they can be helpful, because when we are experiencing something like depression or anxiety, sometimes to have somebody say, this is actually what you're experiencing and it's okay, and many people do, and we know how to treat it, quote unquote, or thrive with it, like you said, which I love, that can be a relief, because we can say, oh, things aren't feeling normal and I have now a pathway to improve. But on the other hand, I think especially working with young people, and I've done a lot of work with adolescents, when we are too quick to label children or adolescents, we can sort of limit them in a way as well. So I think part of it is understanding that we can sort of work out a subset of symptoms or experiences, whether it's in the clinical setting or in our life, but not getting too rigidly attached to it, and understanding that, okay, a child might meet this sort of description right now, and here are the ways that we can use evidence-based intervention to support the child without kind of carrying this as like something to go into their whole future with them. Because as adults, we all have individual differences, as humans, but we don't want to use labels to limit us in a way. And I think that what we describe in psychology as the third wave of, cognitive behavior therapy, or more recently talked about as like a process-based therapy. I know I'm dropping lots of psych words, but we've started to look at it differently, where we see the human first, and we work to build strengths and take into account values and more individual differences than what we did previously, which I think is a really beautiful way to integrate how messy it is to be human and also clinical practice.
What you said, I really resonated with because I remember being firstly diagnosed with depression when I was teaching and it coming as such an enormous relief because as a young adult experiencing so much hopelessness and misery, and yet on the face of my life, looking around, if there were check boxes for what you'd kind of aspire to in your early 20s, I could have probably ticked most of those boxes. I was happy and well, friends, engaged to be married. We'd bought our own home. We had fur babies. I had a great job. I was fit and well and healthy, but absolutely miserable. And then to be told you've got depression, you're experiencing depression was an enormous relief because of exactly what you just said. So, yeah, I can really see a place for that. And I spent a lot of time in CBT with an amazing person in my life who I wrote about a lot in Anxious Mums. And as I went through life and learned more, met new people, and was exposed to different ideas, and I discovered acceptance and commitment therapy and just dived right into all the training and the research. And it was just so empowering and life changing. And I absolutely love that this is becoming sort of a really big part of a lot of the work that psychologists like yourself are doing. And how are you finding clients' journeys are different with this type of approach? What are you seeing, and how quickly are clients able to sort of adopt these new ideas and embrace the approach that you're using with them?
I mean, instantly. I think that's the beauty of acceptance and commitment therapy. And I knew from listening to your work that that was something that you were aligned with as well. And you would have seen the themes throughout my book too. I'm sure you recognize them.
Yes.
If anyone hasn't heard of it, it's definitely something to dive into and have a look into, because I think it's something that you can apply from a self help perspective. You can read the
Mm.
book and you can start making immediate changes. And then you can also see a therapist, which I definitely recommend, especially if you have something really painful or uncomfortable that you're working through, to have that support person. But there's so many positives, because I think the therapist comes from a perspective of not being on a pedestal, that there are two equal humans in the room, and that there is a little bit of space for the therapist to show up in a professional way, but also as an authentic human, which I really loved, because we're often trained in a more traditional setting of keeping our stuff out of the room, which of course we need boundaries. But I love, like on your
Mm.
podcast, you bring forward your authentic self and your more vulnerable sides too, which, is what people to relate to and help them feel normal. So I think that just having that relationship and that dynamic in the room is the very first thing that makes people feel normal, human, and safe to express how they're feeling and validated, I guess. And that can be such a healing part of therapy, to just feel connected and normal. I've literally just got off a group peer supervision session with lots of new and mums who have young children who are also psychologists, and we were just supporting each other in the challenges that it is to be a psychologist and a parent, and how they impact each other and all those sorts of things. And we're all going through the exact same thing, but isolated in our home. So just bringing that community it's just so healing and validating to know that, we're absolutely not alone in what we're feeling. So I think that's the very first part of feeling instantly a bit relieved. But secondly, I think coming from a practical point, we can implement some coping strategies in the very first and second session that we have, just drawing on our individual preferences and strengths, and then getting clear on our values, which might take a little bit more time or a little bit more reflection, even in our own time. That can really help us to steer. Because often when we're stuck or we're in a rut, we have some important decisions to make, whether it be boundaries we need to set, new directions we need to go in, and just getting a little bit of clarity on what's contributing to our situation that's not helping us to thrive, which usually can involve lifestyle factors and environmental factors as well.
And decision making can be really hard, particularly if you are struggling with your mental health, and the idea of understanding your values. And then you become clear on what's important to you. And then decision making all of a sudden comes from a different perspective. And you've got almost in black and white, you can write down what your values are. I've actually redone my values just this week. And it's just a beautiful thing. Even if people listening have done it before, it's a really wonderful thing to revisit, isn't it? Because
Mhm.
once you know what matters to you, what's most important in your life, then it is easier to make decisions, even if they're otherwise challenging decisions.
Absolutely. And I also redid mine recently, coming into a new stage of my life and a new, feels like a new chapter. So I love that you normalize that our values can change, and they do. And rather than resisting and trying to, I guess, go back or stay as we are, or, feel more myself, I say in kind of quote marks, it's like allowing yourself to evolve into the new version of yourself. And sometimes that means, yeah, changing your values. And then that's going to reflect a change in your life on the external once you start aligning your decisions with your values. But as you said, if someone is experiencing depression or anxiety, or even from a non clinical perspective, just a bit of confusion or lack of clarity, or just feeling a little bit pulled in different directions, especially if you have multiple demands, like you're a parent and you're a professional, or you're, managing, caring for someone. We all have multiple layers to life. So it can help to talk to someone, or join a group, or have a journaling practice, just so we can get a little bit of clarity. And I'm a huge fan of bringing in self reflective practices to whatever we're doing.
When you're helping people develop self-reflective practices, how do you support them to bring that into their life?
I think the way that I support that is through learning about what works for them and what their preferences are. Because, something that I talk about in my book a lot is meditation. But some people are not feeling inclined towards it, or they're not in a place where they feel like they can start right now. And that's completely fine and normal. And we also, I think, we evolve in the way that we reflect over time, and we go through different things suit us at different stages of our life. So
Mhm.
normalizing that and trying to bring self-reflection into, I guess, something that's pleasurable, or, nourishing self-care. So for some people it might be a meditation practice. More recently have found that I am really enjoying just movement and walking. So I'll do a bit more self-reflective practices when I walk, and then I might get home and jot down any things that I want to journal, or anything that's popping up and I want to get more clarity on. Some people, might like to actually set something concrete into their calendar, like go and get a massage and then go get a coffee afterwards for 15 minutes. Or there's no rules around it. It might be an escape into nature. It could even be like a grand gesture of, going away for the weekend alone and leaving all your responsibilities at home. So there's no rules around how you self reflect, but I think it's about plugging it into your current self care, what you can manage, what your timetable's like, and just protecting that time and space with a bit of flexibility as well. So, not beating
Mm.
yourself up if you miss a day, but making sure that it is important to you, because we can easily let, 6 months pass without going back to what is nourishing us.
We can. And the idea of being overscheduled being one of the things you are not about. When we're overscheduled and we've got sort of too many balls in the air and too many responsibilities, we're overcommitted or overwhelmed, then it's hard to remember to take the time to actually stop and reflect on how you are and how you're feeling and what you need. And you hear the saying that we're human beings, we're not human doings. But and I'm guilty of it as well. I have a lot of space in my life, but self reflection isn't something that I devote time to with the view to it being a priority. And it's a realization for me. I think sitting here talking to you that I can easily go through days or weeks, and I do reflect on how I feel. And when we chatted this morning, I shared with you a little bit
Mhm.
about how I'm feeling today. There's quite a lot going on, and I've shared with listeners before some of the things that are sort of happening in our life here at the moment. So I think I do check in. I guess that's almost sort of woven into my day. Is I'm aware of how I'm feeling, but that usually comes up, I guess, when I'm not feeling great, and that I have this recognition of something. Whereas if I was to bring a self reflective practice into a particular time of the day or a particular experience that I bring into my calendar, then I think that I'd be able to also reflect when I'm feeling really good and when things are going well, because it's not just about not feeling good, is it? Self reflection's about how you are as a whole human, the ups and the downs. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's embracing the full spectrum of human emotions and experiences and not preferring the positive and the pleasant ones. It's making space for all of it. And sometimes it can be bringing in a bit of gratitude. So when we are in the good times and life is feeling really easeful and balanced, we might write down what we're grateful for. We might just ponder it. We might say it to our partners. Like there's no rules around how we do it. But sort of, I think it's great to be aware of what is working for us and why we feel nourished so that when it does derail a little bit, we kind of know how to pull back or where to pivot, which can be really useful
Mm.
because then we get to know ourselves better and why things will work in. And of course, there's always things that are out of our control. So sometimes when we're managing things that we'd rather not be managing, like the things that pop up in life, we're able to make some space for that and be flexible, but also know ourselves enough to know what we need to help us cope and get through those harder times too. So that's where it helps us to develop self awareness and, yeah, get through those times where we can't actually change our external circumstances. I guess we've all been through that through the pandemic, and get a little bit of autonomy and control around what is within our control so that we don't feel completely helpless and hopeless as well when things are feeling uncomfortable and a bit scary.
That's where the idea of knowing what's important, and I've shared before here the dropping anchor grounding strategy and the acronym ACE. There is an addition to that, which is the F for focus on what you control, A for acknowledge thoughts and feelings, C for come back into your body, and E, engage in what's important, which is really where our values can come in, or re-engage in what you were doing. I mean, I had to use this strategy last week. I really drew on these skills because I'd had some blood tests undertaken and I'd been and seen not my normal GP because he wasn't available, but saw another GP I love to see, gone through the blood tests and everything was a-okay, no problems. But then getting ready for the wedding and really excited about a really wonderful night ahead. And I was feeling pretty carefree, which was a nice feeling. I noticed that I felt like, I was in a really good state of mind to go out and have a really fantastic time. And then I get a message from my GP clinic saying, please make arrangements to come into the clinic to discuss some recent tests. And I'm like, when your heart sinks, that anxiety washed over me, thinking, was there an outstanding test? They don't call you into the doctor if something's not wrong. And all of a sudden, in times gone by, I would have been really derailed by that experience. I would have felt that my day was wrecked and that I would be just in this spiral of worry and this overwhelm and all of these anxious feelings. And so I used my dropping anchor skills and I used my diffusion skills, noticing my thoughts, noticing that they were becoming catastrophic there for a moment. I notice I'm having the thought that something's really wrong. What's in my control? Okay, acknowledging what I'm feeling. I'm going to come back into my body, press my feet into the floor, use my senses, and then re-engage. What am I doing? Well, I'm doing my makeup. Well, actually, my makeup was done. I was doing my hair. I was actually sort of taking off. Actually, what I was doing was actually taking off some of the makeup. It was a bit much. And I was able to put these into practice and go out and enjoy the night. And it didn't come up for me again because I was able to really engage and be present and just enjoy a fantastic event and celebrate our beautiful friend's wedding. But that E of that acronym, that FACE, that re-engage, that it's either what you were doing in the moment, where you were, what was required of you, whether it's work or conversation or parenting or something aligned with your values. If there's nothing else that's required of you in the moment, our values can really help move us forward, even if our really difficult thoughts and feelings kind of have to come along with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you said they come along with us because, when we're anxious, our default is to avoid, cancel, withdraw, suppress, the things that we do naturally to cope. So it's really important when we can bring awareness to that and allow that feeling and regulate it and ground in it, that we actually can just go on with our day. So when these feelings come up, we don't have to get lost in them or carried away, we can kind of take a moment. And that is a self reflective practice to just
Mhm.
pause and notice our heart rate increasing, notice our mind go off on those stories that are worst case scenario, and, all the things, all the bad things that are going to happen in that next appointment, to, just being aware of it and then coming back to the now, and making that choice to lean into what feels meaningful and aligned with you, which was going to the wedding and enjoying your friend, seeing your friend get married, which is really beautiful.
It really was. And I kind of had a little chuckle that the night after the wedding, the next morning, we were getting up to go out for brunch. I overlooked saying, I did ring the clinic to say, I've seen about my results. Is there something outstanding? Do I need to make an appointment, or is this something that is a product of having seen a different GP for the results? And she said, I'll get the nurse to call you back. And of course, I was really hoping that would be within 10 minutes. Of course, I got that phone call the next morning just as we were heading out for brunch. And I thought, so basically the whole wedding experience was bookended by this anxiety provoking sort of text message and then this, I guess, relieving call. And I sort of chuckled because I thought, yeah, typical, I've really had to really draw on my skills for this. But I also did think to myself, that whatever comes up, whatever it is, I would rather know, because that avoidance is innate, isn't it? This idea that it's too
Mhm.
painful, too difficult. And even for some people getting tests done, some people listening, you might have something that you'd like to go and see about, but you feel anxious and worried, and that can be really natural. But I'd really encourage you to not let it stand in the way of doing what you need to do, because like with anything in life, we all have lots of ailments and niggles and things that need treating, and maybe some extra tests, and the sooner the better for anything. But it is hard, isn't it? Like I did have to say to myself, look, whatever it is, it's not in my control right now, but whatever it is, I'll deal with it when it comes. And of course there was nothing to deal with this time, but these things happen all throughout our life, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you know yourself well enough to know what you needed to do to cope. And sometimes we need to reach for a little bit of control, which was, can the nurse call me back? I just want to check. That's how we get a little bit of control over a situation that we're out of control of. And
Mm,
there is, yeah, that huge lesson that we're all constantly learning, myself included, that is that as soon as we feel in control, usually life has a way of showing us that we're not in control. And it's like this, yeah, I don't know if you want to call it a spiritual lesson that shows and shows and shows, whether it's in the greater collective about what's happening out in the world, or whether it's in our more, day-to-day lives. So I think the more we lean into that and allow and embrace that illusion of control, the more we're able to cope with these things that pop up. And another point that I wanted to highlight that you mentioned was something that we do is avoid making appointments, and that is an avoidance of, self-care, and I guess bringing our well-being to the forefront and the center of our life is something that we often weren't taught to do. And it's directly related to our mental health, like you said, and I don't think it's discussed enough how important that is, because we might have patterns of, yeah, avoidance, or not speaking up, or not being assertive, or, we go to a doctor about something and they say, oh, yeah, you're fine. And we kind of have that feeling that, no, I'm not satisfied. I need to see someone else or a different specialist, but we don't do it because we're like, oh, that's comfortable. Everything's fine. I'm going to, not do that until later. So I think it's a
mm,
really good act of radical self care to follow something up. And I have literally been avoiding something, just that wasn't urgent. I was like, oh, do it later, do it later. And then a few years went by. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go sort that thing out. And I've done it just like literally on Monday. And, I'm in the process of it. And it feels really good. It feels like, wow, that wasn't that important, but I'm doing that for myself. It's like ruthless self compassion that I'm
mm.
worth following this thing up, and that is worthy of my time and money, even if it's something that might be small, but it's important because it's a part of me.
I think you're right in saying that we're not taught to do that. And I think this generations of kids to come, we're both parents, and a lot of parents will be listening in today, and or when, not necessarily the day the podcast is released, but on other days. And this next generations to come are so lucky, aren't they, in that we as parents are able to learn so much, just how much we can do to really equip our kids to cope with challenges, but also to really take good care of themselves and enrich their well-being and bolster their mental health so that they've, I guess, got more reserves and more resilience and better able to get through life's ups and downs, as you said so beautifully, that just when we think we've got it sorted, I mean, parenting's just a prime example. Just when you think you're in a routine, hello, we're now dropping our day sleep. Hello, now I'm onto solids, or hello, now I'm waking in the night, or I'm getting teeth, or and so on and so on. But yeah, you're right. The idea that we can equip, and we can learn from it too. Now we can equip our kids, and we can learn now. It's never too late to start, is it? Applying this new knowledge to our own lives as well as equipping the people that we care about.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, modeling it for young people as well. And most people can probably recognize there is that intergenerational difference between, our parents, our grandparents, us, and then our children. And it's almost like we're getting better and better each generation at taking care of ourselves. And that's not a personal, fault of our own. It's just the society that and the awareness that we've been given. I noticed it a lot through pregnancy and the process of giving birth and taking care of myself after birth, that we have all this awareness and information about how to set up our support system, how to set the boundaries that we need, how to nourish ourselves and things like that. And then just observing the different attitudes and themes that come through different generations, I feel a little bit sad when I hear someone who's, very wise, multiple children, who's much older, who's, later in life. Oh, we didn't do any of that. And that's, ridiculous. And you'll be fine next week. And, those sorts of things. And my heart was like, wow, like that's how you treated yourself. And that's how you were expected to get on with it the week after giving birth, or those sorts of things. So that really highlighted to me just how different our lives are. And sometimes I think we can feel like maybe we're a little bit precious now, or we're sometimes too into self-care and things like that. So I think it's understanding how we take care of ourselves affects those around us, especially when we're a caregiver or a carer, or it might be, we're a boss and we've got staff. And, if no matter what your relationship is with other people, we're all in relationships, whether it's partnerships, parents, we're colleagues, we're bosses. How we feel and how we take care of ourselves directly impacts the people around us. So it's absolutely not selfish to do what we need to do to take care of ourselves, to set those boundaries. Because I don't know about you, but when I don't take care of myself, it's the people who are closest to me who cop the brunt of that. And in a role where you're a boss, or a parent, or a colleague, you've got huge responsibilities to show up as a human that's not harmful, but b that's able to show up as someone who is aligned with their values, doesn't however that feels right for you. And it's okay, we all make mistakes and we all stuff up, but it feels better for us and for other people when we sort of take responsibility for ourselves, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And it was interesting talking on, I was a guest on somebody else's podcast recently, and it was a podcast whereby callers could call in and ask questions, and then they would share that interview question. And I responded to this question, which was about a mum feeling just so terribly guilty she was struggling to sort of meet all the expectations that she had on her, and she felt terribly guilty wanting to bring more into her life for herself, particularly exercise and looking after herself, but just felt that overwhelming guilt. And one of the things that I said to her via the medium of podcast was that when we take care of ourselves, we're showing those around us that that's important for them to do for themselves as well. And if we're all sacrificing as parents or partners or colleagues, then we're not setting a good example for other people around us. And particularly as parents, we want our children to be kind and be good humans, of course, but also to know their worth and how important it is that they take good care of themselves. And if we never do that for us, how on earth are they going to learn to do that in their lives moving forward? And so, if nothing else, even if it is prompted by the need to be that sort of role model. Hopefully, it's not just prompted by that for people, but people can see the inherent value in doing it just purely for yourself. But it's important on so many levels, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's so true. And I think we can be so influenced by what's socially acceptable around us. If our friends are active or if they prioritize their exercise classes versus if they're on the self sacrifice side of, you know, I'm going to work X amount of hours, I'm going to do this and that and everything else. So we can be really influenced by what we feel is acceptable. And then, we can also we can be shamed by other people, we can shame ourselves, whether someone says, "Oh, well, I didn't get to do that when I was, in your position," or, "Oh, well, wouldn't that be nice?" Or, those comments that we get off people. And I think it's really important to develop that internal navigation system, like I talk about in the book, that we make these decisions for ourselves and we're able to protect them in a way that we know what we're doing and why, and other people's reactions to what we do, whether it be partners, parents, friends, that we're able to recognize their projections, that, oh, wow, it's sad that they feel that way, because if they're shaming me for, taking that time to go to yoga, then obviously they're not able to do that for themselves. And like you said, I can model self-worth. I can model that if I can do this, you can do that. And yeah, we're always looking at each other for what is acceptable. So I think that that's a really good social sort of theme that you pointed out, that we can be the leader as well. We don't have to wait for someone else to give us permission, a permission slip. And us anxious type can be more on the people pleasing side too. So we're constantly looking for what's acceptable and where we're going to be accepted and embraced. And I guess sometimes we have to, yeah, step into the brave the wilderness, as Brene Brown would say, and just take control of our own lives and our own well-being.
What would you recommend to somebody who's listening to start on this, sort of take that step forward? And I know you shared some beautiful examples earlier of how people can bring more self-reflection into their day. But in terms of self-care, and one other thing that you mentioned earlier was around in first appointments with clients, bringing in a couple of really good coping skills, or bringing in some coping skills to sort of help them initially and immediately in a first or a second session. So my question to you is, what would be, say, 2 or 3 suggestions you could make for listeners that could help them have a choice of where they might start if they'd like to bring a bit more time for themselves, time to really invest in their mental health and well-being into their day?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. I think what I would encourage everyone to do is to take some time, whether it's now you pause the podcast or whether you take some time afterwards, and sit down and write down what actually nourishes you, what fills up your cup, and what you feel like you need. So for some people, like at times, for me, it's been actually something like this. It's been like able to have the time and space to have a conversation, like on this podcast. But sometimes it's you need more quiet. So sometimes we need more stimulation, sometimes we need less. And tuning into our sensory profile, I think, is important as well. So start to bring awareness to what you need. If you're overscheduled and you're really busy and you don't have time to think, you feel like you're going from one thing to another, it's probably something more still and quiet that you need, whether that be booking that massage, going to a sauna, or starting a meditation practice or a yoga class if you need to leave the house to get that space. And then building your routine. Don't just feel like, oh, I'll just go once a week. Like that's not going to happen unless you say, I'm going every Friday at this time. And, this is person who's going to have the kids. I'm not working during this time. You actually have to set boundaries around that time, especially when you have competing demands. But for other people, if you're on the side of, you're maybe a stay-home parent, or you're living in a rural capacity, and maybe you're feeling lonely or isolated, and you're feeling understimulated in that way, it might actually be the complete opposite, that you need more connection. And maybe you need to join some sort of group, whether it's over a shared interest or a support group. It might not necessarily be a therapy group, although that is an option. You might engage in something professionally. So join in an online course or something where you can develop intellectual or academic or business strategies or whatever skills. So there's no rules around self care, but I think it's knowing whether you need more or less, and what would bring more meaning and value to our lives now. Because it's not always getting rid of things out of our schedule. If they're meaningful, that can actually bring vitality and energy to our lives too. So that's a self reflection exercise I'd recommend that you do, so that you can actually change something in your schedule. Second thing that I would say is that um, if you don't already have any sort of mindfulness practice, one of the first things I would start with is a breathing exercise or a breathwork practice. So it might be just sitting and practicing 10 deep breaths to start with. So putting your feet on the floor, taking a big deep breath in through your nose, slowly exhaling, and doing that process, for 2 minutes or 10 breaths, and just trying to incorporate that into your day. So when you're running around or you get that email or that text, you can drop anchor, but it's really important that we practice these skills when we're not triggered. Because if we have never practiced it before, when we are triggered by that person or that email or that situation, we don't have anything to draw on because we haven't practiced. So part of therapy is often exposing us to a little bit of discomfort or bringing up those emotions and regulating them in a safe and contained way. So we can practice that at home too. So I wouldn't practice on a huge trigger. Like if you ranked your triggers from 1 to 10, I wouldn't start with a 7, 8, 9, 10, especially on your own at home. If you feel a little trigger, like a 2 or 3, where you notice your heartbeat is starting to speed up, your tummy's starting, you're starting to mentally check out a little bit or catastrophize, just catch that feeling and see if you can practice breathing through it, regulating it, noticing your mind, and practicing that anchoring, like the example you gave before, in a situation that's not overwhelming. So that's the
Mm.
second thing.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing those. I think each of those examples gives people an opportunity to start somewhere tangible, and neither of those necessarily require a great deal of time, but more consistency, don't they?
Yeah.
And the idea of what you said about the practice is, it reminds me when I first started therapy, I was taught to meditate. And this was pre-children. And I giggle because I'm the sort of person that if something's wrong and you tell me what to do to help myself, I will do it. And I was taught by my beautiful psychologist to meditate and to bring that into my day twice a day for 20 minutes. And so that's what I did. And it was life changing. And he also invited me to consider if I would like to use in my mind a word that I would think as I exhaled. And I don't know how to describe the connection that it created. And hopefully you'll be able to help me understand a little bit better, but also help listeners understand the connection that that word created with the relaxation, the deep relaxation of my body. And meditation was terribly hard for me. And I did not start at 20 minutes twice a day. I built up from like 20 seconds pretty much. And my mind would wander, 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 wander. I'd love to talk a bit more about helping people start a meditation practice. But as I built up and persevered and just developed this acceptance of the experience and developed this connection between this word and this deep relaxation, when I would be triggered, when I would have moments that would become overwhelming, especially when I became a parent, parenting was very, very hard for me. And I had postnatal depression with both children, and it was undiagnosed. And so that was an added layer of challenge because we didn't really know why I was not coping. But having so much practice under my belt, and even though I wasn't continuing a twice daily meditation practice, I was able to draw on that, take a breath in. As I breathe out, I would just use this word and my whole body would relax. And so it became this dependable coping strategy because I'd put in the work. I was then able to draw on it when I was really highly triggered.
Mhm.
And it's to this day, I really hope to get back into a twice daily meditation practice. There's been avoidance for me around that. I work to be mindful and present in pockets during the day as much as I can, as much as I remember to. But the practice of it was profound for me. And that's what's keeping it top of mind for the next thing that I'd like to bring into my own self-care practice. I do a lot of exercise, but I'm a person that needs more of that low stimulation in my life. So what do you make of that connection? Is that something that you teach when you teach meditation? And how would you teach somebody to begin and to be able to cope with the idea that we're sitting with our breath, but our mind will wander a lot to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. All of those things. I think the way that you just described your experience is something that everyone can learn from. And you also just modeled the self awareness of sharing that you need more low stimulation activity in your life. So you've already sort of nutted that out from even a sensory point of view. And similarly, I'm exactly the same, where I felt like I was doing all this exercise and socializing and all these things that were bringing value to my life. And just like a week or two ago, I'm like, I actually need to pull back and slow down and bring more mindfulness into my exercise. Especially as a mum, you can't necessarily go to the gym, separate, and then sit down for 20 minutes twice a day and then do your journal. Like, you just don't have the time in your day. So I think first bringing in compassion that we just can't do all these things that we would like to do or maybe previously could do. But secondly, working out what we're going to get more bang for our buck in terms of that hour that we can make space for at this time. In terms of your actual practical practice, I also practice a mantra-based meditation, which is formerly known as transcendental meditation or Vedic meditation. And it's really similar to what you're describing, in that you get given a word from your meditation teacher, and you use that word as an anchor to drop into a part of the mind that is already still. That's kind of the philosophy, that we don't have to clear our thoughts. We don't have to stop our thinking, because if anyone's tried that, you obviously know it doesn't work. We can't just stop and get rid of our thoughts. It's not how our mind works. So the sooner that we release that expectation, the easier or the more easeful meditation is, because there's different types of meditation. So there are what we refer to as more contemplative practices, where we are just bringing open awareness and mindful presence to what is happening in the here and now. So we're actually observing our thoughts come and go. We're not pushing them away and trying to get rid of them. And we're also observing our emotions. So our emotions are rising. We are probably going to feel irritated, discomfort. Our mind's going to go on stories as to why this isn't working. I should be doing something else. There's something more important to do. And we generally feel a lot of discomfort when we start meditation. And I kind of find it's one of those things that the more we do, the more we want to do. And the less we do, the harder it is, and the more avoidance that pops up. So making space for that discomfort, and the mind or the ego will just run wild, especially when we're getting back into it or starting a new practice, which is why I advocate for getting some sort of teacher that has experience when we're first starting a practice, or joining a group, because it's really a lot easier to get through that avoidance and discomfort that we all experience. But in terms of the word and how that can be useful, I really think it's great in modern life to use a mantra-based practice, because it's something that we can focus on that's tangible. So we've got thoughts coming and going, and we just gently come back to the word or the mantra that we're using. And it's sort of that anchor, and it helps us to tap into this part of the mind and the body that is still. And I'm sure you can experience that sort of drop-in feeling that we get, which, is not always going to happen. We don't want expectations. And I tend to find that if we haven't been meditating, it's going to take a bit longer. And the more we're doing it consistently twice a day, the easier it is to drop into that feeling where we're feeling more calm and blissful, but we can't control that experience. Often the first meditation of the day is sort of to clear the noise a little bit and to just notice it. And then the second one is when we experience a lot of the benefits, which is why a lot of teachers recommend twice a day, but it's not practical for everyone all the time. So making space for whatever you have time for at the moment. But another thing that I think is great about the mantra is that that word becomes like that anchor that you were talking about earlier in the episode. And it becomes in Vedic philosophy, you don't tell anyone your mantra in terms of the transcendental meditation. If you do want to do a course and learn a Vedic style of meditation, I think there's something sacred about having a word that no one else knows. It's like this safe place that you can go to and create internally. And when we're anxious, or if we've experienced trauma before, which, we've all experienced micro traumas in our life, it's just part of being human. It's this place that when we're triggered, or we're, in the murky waters, something's popped up, we're having a really difficult time coping, it becomes this safe place that we can go to within us, and we don't need anything else. We don't need headphones or a phone, and we can kind of get back to our center.
It's one of those experiences in my life when I was able to use that and to be able to practice the way I did, thankfully, before we had our first child, the difference that that made. And I feel a bit of sadness talking about it because I haven't completely left it behind, but I've lost that practice from my life that was so meaningful at the time and so powerful and so helpful. And I've adopted a dropping anchor practice. But yeah, I guess talking about it is good because it's something that's worked so beautifully in the past, and I've built this beautiful foundation. And there's still that place in me,
Mhm.
and so I can get back there. Sometimes there can be a misconception, I believe, that you have to be a very spiritual person, or that your mantra needs to be an om, or your mantra needs to be something that maybe doesn't sit quite comfortably with other beliefs and values.
I teach general mindfulness and meditation practices, but like you said, there can be a limitation to entry in terms of it coming from an ancient Indian philosophy. Some people think it's religious, or it doesn't align with their religious or spiritual beliefs. And really, every religion has a form of contemplation in it. And I think as a lot of religion has, changed, and a lot of us don't have a sort of religious part of our lives anymore. Some people do, some people don't. And so I think meditation transcends any of the differences that we have in terms of our beliefs and our values. And it's a way to, if we want to look at it from a scientific perspective, there's a lot of research on it being an incredibly supportive practice for our brain physically, the function of our brain, the structure of our brain, and our psychological well-being. So we are more than welcome to completely ignore any of the other things that people talk about the feeling of oneness, and all those things that can be a little bit foo-foo for some people. We can purely focus on the science of it, or if you want to focus on the spiritual side because that brings joy and meaning to your life, that's fine. There's absolutely no rules. But I guess the point is that if we practice it, we are experiencing the benefits that we want to bring into our life, and there are no rules about how we do it or how we bring it in. So yeah, there doesn't need to be an om. You can treat it purely as a concentration practice and allow it to become your own practice and style that you want to do. You don't have to listen to that teacher. You don't have to do it that way. Bring it in a way that's nourishing and works for you and aligns with your values and beliefs.
It's such good advice because I imagine that like anything, and it's the same with exercise. Like my advice to people around exercise, they'll say, "What's the best?" And it's the one that you like. The one that
Yes.
feels right for you is the best one for you, and what's best for you might be very different to what's best for me. And
Yeah.
I think with meditation, I think that's such good advice because it can be practiced in a number of different ways. As you say, you could simply sit in a comfortable position in a quiet space, close your eyes, and use your senses to tune into everything that's happening around you. I remember doing that in primary school. I have a distinct memory of being asked to just listen. And I didn't know I had anxiety at the time. And I do remember listening and just feeling this sense of relaxation and this sense of peace that was not common for me. And I remember a different teacher on another day, and I don't remember a lot of my younger years. I just don't remember a lot. That another teacher, an ET, an emergency teacher, came in and taught us a progressive muscle relaxation. And this was back in the 80s. And
Mm.
I remember those two experiences being profoundly relaxing. So it could be a meditation sitting and just keeping your attention on the breath, as you've suggested. And when our mind wanders, as it will, notice, thank our mind for what it does so naturally, and bring your attention back. And it can wander and return and wander and return. And the more we practice, the more easily we're able to notice we've wandered and unhook, aren't we? It's sort of less sticky. We're able to come back. And every now and again, you realize you've been meditating and your mind has stayed present on your breathing, the sensation of breathing in or out. So they're just a couple of examples, but I love that you've brought to our attention the idea that, well, if you try one particular way and it's not right for you, try something else, because we can all benefit from it when we find the right fit. And it's probably a really great place to finish, despite the fact that I've got so many other questions bubbling away. But I'd love, love, love you to join me again on the podcast. And I guess what I'd really love to do now is to ask you how people can connect with your work, purchase your beautiful book, perhaps join a group, or find you and follow you and learn more from you.
Yes, thank you so much. The best place to find me is on my website, www.reneecachia.com. I'm active on social media at Renee Cachia PhD, so you can find and connect with me there. Yeah, my book is called Parenting Freedom, so you'll find the links on my website or socials, or you can purchase off Amazon, or there's also an audio book. So if you do read it, I would love to hear your takeaways and thoughts. That's something that I love hearing. As I was saying to you before we jumped on the call, every time I talk to someone, they bring up something different in the book. I just never know what the main takeaway is going to be, or how it's going to feel relevant, because it's about parenting. And if we're not a parent, we have been parented. So it's a book where it facilitates that self-reflection on our own journey being parented and as a child, and how that has impacted us today. So love to hear from you if you do have any thoughts or takeaways or wisdoms. Yeah, keep in touch. And I would love to come back on. We have so many more things that we intended to talk about that we just can't even scrape the surface today.
No, that's right. That's right. And I do encourage you with Renee's book, and her surname is spelled Cachia. And I want to just add to that as an author, we write books and we pour our hearts and souls into what we write. And it's an unusual occupation, isn't it, in that you pour your whole head, heart and soul into something that you then hatch into the world, as the beautiful Karen Young will say. She's just recently hatched a new book. And then the only way you know how it's impacting people's lives is when people do write. And I, like you, receive beautiful messages and messages about the podcast, or if you do a presentation, as I know you're a speaker as well as a clinical psych. And it is, I think about the books I've read that I've just loved, and that I've never thought to go, I'm just going to write to that author and let them know that I loved it. I've recently read both the kids' novels. I've read our daughter's year 6 novel and our son's year 8 novel, because I read too much nonfiction at night and then my head won't rest when I'm trying to go to sleep. So I'm just like, where's some fiction I can read? And in fact, they were just amazing, amazing books. And I must write to those authors, because so often we think, oh, that was great. I learned so much. I was inspired. Yes, I mean, there's no pressure on you people listening, but I just thought I'd share that, because it's always beautiful to receive those messages. It really does sort of lift us, doesn't it? And help us to know that, yes, what we're doing is helping, and certainly where it's landing and what people are sort of looking for more of, so that we can do more work that makes a difference. So, So no, look, Renee, thank you for your time. I've just absolutely loved listening and learning here with you today, and you sharing your wisdom with us is just so generous. And I know that, as a new mum, and I overlooked saying congratulations, and I'm just so thrilled for you. I know that time is very precious, so thank you very, very much for sharing some of yours here with us today.
Thank you so much for your kind words and support, and for having me. It's been such a great conversation, very nourishing for me.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.